The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across the quiet street as James Jim Callahan carefully parked his van by the curb. With slow, deliberate movements, he opened the side door, lowered the lift, and wheeled himself down onto the sidewalk. His wheelchair creaked faintly as he adjusted his coat and smoothed out the wrinkles on his neatly ironed shirt. It was a big day for him. Not his birthday, not a national holiday, just a date only he remembered. The day he came home from Vietnam. Every year for the last 25 years, Jim honored it quietly, usually with a simple meal, somewhere small. But this year, he'd saved up, set aside a few bucks every month from his modest VA checks, because he'd heard about a new upscale restaurant in town, Cielo. Modern, stylish, always full of polished young people drinking expensive coffee and eating $30 lunches. But Jim didn't mind. He wasn't looking for anything fancy. Just a good hot meal, maybe a slice of pie, and the satisfaction of treating himself like he mattered. He wheeled himself slowly toward the glass front doors. It took a little effort to hold them open while maneuvering his chair, but he managed without asking for help. Inside, the ambiance was soft, elegant. Walls of stone and wood, string lights, leather booths. A young hostess in a sleek black uniform looked up from her phone. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi," Jim said, voice gentle, eyes kind. "Just one, please." The hostess glanced at the wheelchair, then down at the reservation list. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked quickly. "No, ma'am," Jim replied. "Didn't think I'd need one for lunch." Her smile faded further. "Lunch rush is pretty busy. Might be a wait." Jim nodded, still calm. "That's all right. I don't mind waiting." She pointed to a small bench near the entryway. "You can wait over there." Jim wheeled himself aside, parked near the bench, and folded his hands. The smells from the kitchen reached him. Rosemary, garlic, fresh bread. His stomach growled quietly. He hadn't eaten all day. He wanted to enjoy this meal, to feel human for an afternoon, like he belonged. Within minutes, he noticed something odd. A couple came in, young, laughing, no reservation. They were seated right away. Then a trio of women walked in, chatting loudly about some influencer's podcast. Also no reservation. They were escorted to a booth near the window. Jim blinked. He waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He tried not to let it get to him. Maybe they really were full. Maybe they had call-ahead guests. He looked around. 3 tables sat empty. 1 was being cleaned. He wheeled back toward the hostess. "Excuse me, ma'am. Just wondering if a table might be ready soon." She looked at him, then looked down at her iPad. "We're still really full," she said flatly. He gestured politely. "I just noticed a few empty tables, that's all." She hesitated, then said, "Oh, those are for people with reservations. Maybe try somewhere else nearby?" Jim's smile faltered. He didn't raise his voice, didn't protest. "I can wait. I don't mind." A server walking by muttered under his breath, not softly enough. "Isn't there a diner down the street?" Jim heard it. He always heard it. The assumptions, the dismissal. He'd seen it before. People saw the chair and thought slow, inconvenient, or worse, less. He took a slow breath and tried again. "I served in the army. I'm not asking for anything special. Just a seat." The hostess didn't meet his eyes. "Sorry, sir, we're really full. I don't think we can help you today." From across the restaurant, a few customers turned their heads. One older man raised an eyebrow but said nothing. A young couple at a nearby table looked uncomfortable. The woman whispered something to her date. He just shrugged and took a sip of his drink. Jim sat there a moment longer. His hands trembled slightly, not from anger but from something older. His spine hurt. His legs were gone. But his pride, that still hurt the most. He turned his chair slowly, quietly heading back toward the door. His coat brushed the floor. He didn't want to cause a scene. He just wanted to leave with whatever dignity he had left. The hostess had already returned to her phone. And then, a voice from the back. "Wait!" Jim stopped. The voice was sharp, older, female. It cut through the room like a blade. He turned his head. A woman in her early 60s stood near the hallway by the kitchen, a dish towel still in her hands, eyes locked on him. "Sir?" she said again, walking toward him, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you say your name was Jim?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Her lips parted like she'd forgotten how to breathe. "Jim Callahan?" "Yes." Something shifted in her face. Her hand, still holding the towel, began to shake. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Jim blinked at the woman now approaching him. She was older, dressed in a sharp navy blouse, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a bun. A dish towel was still crumpled in her hand, forgotten. Her eyes, tired, searching, were fixed on his face like they were looking for something lost a long time ago. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Did you serve with the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry?" Jim's throat tightened. That wasn't a question he heard often, especially not from someone in a trendy restaurant. He nodded slowly. "Vietnam, 1968 to 72. The woman let out a shaky breath. "Was your name Callahan back then, too?" Jim nodded again. "James Callahan. They called me Quiet Cal." He gave a tired smile. Her eyes brimmed with something between recognition and heartbreak. "My brother, Corporal Henry Ames. He served in that battalion. He used to write home about a friend named Quiet Cal. Said he saved his life more than once." The smile faded from Jim's face. He looked down, suddenly pulled back into memories he rarely let out. "Henry," he said, voice heavy. "He was brave. One of the good ones. I was with him when the Jeep hit the mine." She stiffened. "He didn't make it." "No," Jim said, swallowing hard. "He didn't. I pulled him out, but it was too late." The woman closed her eyes for a moment. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for trying, for being there." They stood in silence for a beat. The noise of clinking forks and quiet music carried on in the background, like the world hadn't just shifted. Then the woman straightened and turned her eyes toward the front of the restaurant. She spotted the hostess, still casually scrolling through her phone, completely unaware. "What happened here?" she asked. Jim hesitated. "I just wanted a table. Didn't think I'd need a reservation for lunch." She narrowed her eyes. "And they turned you away?" Jim tried to brush it off. "It's all right. I'm used to it." "No, it's not all right." She marched past him toward the hostess stand. "Emily." The hostess looked up, caught off guard. "Oh, hi, Ms. Martha. I didn't know you were in." "I was in my office, watching the lobby feed." Her voice was calm, but the undercurrent of rage was unmistakable. "Did you turn that man away?" The hostess glanced at Jim, then back at Martha. We're full today." And he didn't have a reservation. "There are 3 empty tables," Martha said coldly. "Those are being held," Emily muttered. Martha's voice dropped lower. "Held for who?" Emily hesitated. "For potential walk-ins." "You mean people who aren't in a wheelchair," Martha said, her voice now sharp as glass. At that, the waiter who had made the earlier remark stepped in. A young man with tattooed arms and a permanent smirk. "Hey, I didn't mean anything by it," he said quickly. "We just weren't sure if we had accessible seating set up." "You didn't even offer," Martha snapped. "You just dismissed him." Jim watched from across the room. People were listening now. Conversations had gone quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The waiter rolled his eyes, not sensing the gravity of the moment. "Okay. Well, it's not like we knew he was some war hero or something." That was the last straw. Martha turned back toward Jim, gesturing gently. "Please, come back in. Let me seat you properly." Jim hesitated. Every part of him wanted to just roll out the door, pretend this didn't hurt, but something in her eyes, fierce, protective, held him there. She guided him through the restaurant, weaving past booths and tables full of watching eyes, until they reached a corner table by the window. It was quiet, private. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warm on the polished wood. "This is my table," Martha said. "No one else ever sits here. It's yours today." Jim gave a quiet nod. "Thank you, ma'am." "No, ma'am. Just Martha." As he settled in, Martha turned to the staff. "Everyone, listen up." Now even the kitchen staff had poked their heads out. Diners turned in their seats. Phones were subtly raised. One teenager across the room had already started recording. "This man," Martha said, voice shaking but firm, "served in Vietnam. He was with my brother. He tried to save his life. He didn't come here asking for applause or a discount or even recognition. He came here for a meal. And you all treated him like he didn't belong." Silence. She turned to the hostess. "Emily, you're done here. Turn in your badge and leave." Emily's face flushed red. "What? You're firing me over him?" "Over how you treated him," Martha corrected. She turned to the waiter. "And you, take your apron off. Go home." "What? He started, but Martha cut him off with a raised hand. No second chances. You humiliated someone who deserves more dignity than any of us can understand." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Martha looked back at Jim. Her eyes welled up. "I'm so sorry." Jim didn't say much. He simply nodded. "You didn't do it. You stopped it. That's what matters." Jim sat quietly at the corner table, sunlight spilling across the white tablecloth like a spotlight. His calloused hands rested on his lap as the hum of conversation returned to the restaurant. Changed, quieter, more reverent. It was like the very air in the room had shifted. Martha was still standing beside him, taking a moment to compose herself. She tucked the dish towel into her waistband and nodded toward the kitchen. "I'll be right back." She disappeared behind the swinging doors, and within moments, the clanging of pans and sharp commands echoed from inside. Whatever was happening back there, it had urgency, like a storm building. Jim looked out the window, the weight of the moment sinking in. He hadn't come here to make a scene. He hadn't even expected kindness. All he wanted was to remember the day quietly, to feel like a person, not a burden. Now, people were whispering about him. Some diners looked over with tentative smiles. A young man in a suit even stood up and approached cautiously. "Sir," he said, voice soft, "I just wanted to say thank you. My grandfather was in Vietnam. He never talked about it, but I know it left scars." Jim nodded. "Most things worth fighting for do." The man nodded once and returned to his seat, humbled. Then, something unexpected happened. The kitchen doors burst open. Martha reemerged, this time not alone. Behind her was the entire kitchen staff. The head chef, sous chefs, line cooks, even a dishwasher still wearing gloves. They followed her single file like soldiers falling into formation. Martha stepped forward and cleared her throat. "Jim," she said, voice steady now, "my team and I would like to serve you personally today. You're not just a guest here, you're the guest." Jim blinked, startled. "That's very kind, but really—" "No," Martha interrupted gently. "This is overdue." The head chef approached, carrying a silver tray. "Mr. Callahan, we've prepared something that's not even on the menu, a special ribeye marinated in rosemary and garlic, just like the kind our old army cook used to make, I'm told." Jim chuckled, the sound cracking slightly in his throat. "He always used too much garlic." "We didn't skimp," the chef replied with a wink. The waitstaff, new faces now, having replaced the ones who were dismissed, brought out warm, crusty bread, a bowl of fresh soup, and a side of roasted vegetables, all plated with care. Martha sat across from him now. "Do you mind if I stay?" Jim shook his head. "Please." She studied him for a moment. "What was he like?" she asked. "Henry. I was just a kid when he left." Jim stared down at the table for a long moment. Then he looked up and smiled softly. "Henry was brave, not just in battle, but in heart. He never let anyone eat alone. He'd give up his rations to cheer up the guys who missed home the most. He once took a letter for me when I was too numb to write." Martha's eyes welled again. "We had this tradition," Jim continued. "After a mission, if we made it back, we'd eat something together. Anything. Just to say, we're still here. It didn't matter if it was cold beans or stale biscuit. It meant something." Martha nodded, taking it in like scripture. "Then today, we're still here." Jim smiled, grateful in a way words couldn't capture. As he dug into the meal, the restaurant moved differently. People weren't just dining. They were watching, learning, absorbing something they'd never seen up close. Real sacrifice, real dignity, real humility. A teenage girl came over with her mother. "Hi, would it be okay if we took a photo with you? For my school project on American heroes." Jim looked surprised. "I'm no hero." Her mom leaned in. "You are today." He allowed it. The photo was quick, respectful. No flashes, just quiet gratitude. Then the door opened. A man in a tailored gray suit walked in. Mid-40s, hair slicked back, Bluetooth earpiece still clipped to his collar. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto Martha. He approached quickly. "Martha, I got your message. What's going on?" Martha stood up. "Stephen, meet Mr. James Callahan." Stephen extended his hand. "Sir." Jim shook it. Stephen looked around the room. "I saw the footage. That hostess, Emily, she was ours for less than 2 weeks. She's gone. So is the waiter. We'll do a public statement. I want to make this right." Jim just raised a hand. "You don't need to fix it with words. It's already been fixed with actions." Stephen nodded slowly, a touch ashamed. "Still, if there's anything you need—" "There is," Jim said. Stephen looked up. Train your people better, Jim said firmly. Not just to follow ADA rules. Train them to see people. Not chairs, not scars. People. Stephen swallowed hard. Yes, sir. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the floor, Jim finished the last bite of his meal. He leaned back, exhaling. Martha reached into her pocket and slid a small box across the table. We usually give gift cards to special guests, but I think this suits you better. He opened it. Inside was a tiny bronze fork and spoon on a velvet base. Engraved beneath it, "We're still here." Jim stared at it. Emotion flickered behind his eyes. He closed the box gently and nodded. "Thank you," he said. "That's exactly what today was about." The dining room had quieted again, not from tension, but reverence. Jim sat still, holding the small velvet box in his hand, the weight of memory pressing gently against his chest. Across from him, Martha remained seated, her expression soft and distant, like she was following a thread back through time. There was a moment of stillness between them before she spoke. "I never got to say goodbye to him." Jim looked up, knowing immediately who she meant. "Henry left for basic training when I was 8, Martha continued. "We were close. He used to let me play with his dog tags, promised me he'd bring back a medal and a story. And then we got the letter. Just a letter. 1 page. That was it." Jim nodded slowly. "They always send the letters first. Then the knock." "We never knew what happened," she said, voice growing tight. "Mom didn't talk about it. Dad shut down. It was like Henry never existed. But I never forgot." She looked at Jim with a kind of pleading in her eyes. "I need to know. Not the official version. I want the truth." Jim sat back, fingers intertwined. He hadn't told this story in decades, not even to his VA counselor, but something about Martha's voice, her need, gave him permission. "It was near Pliku," he began, voice low and steady. 1969, rainy season. We were running recon near the border. Oi. Intel said it was quiet. It wasn't. Martha leaned in as Jim spoke, like each word was drawing her closer to her brother. "We got ambushed. Tripwire in the underbrush. The Jeep flipped. I was ejected. Henry wasn't so lucky. He was trapped under the wreckage, gas tank leaking, ammo cooking in the heat." Jim paused, swallowed. His knuckles were white. "I crawled to him, shrapnel in my leg, vision blurry. I don't even remember how I lifted the Jeep enough, but I got him free. He was conscious, laughing, can you believe it? Laughing through the blood. He said, 'Guess I'm not getting that story home after all.'" Martha's hand covered her mouth. "He made me promise to tell you he was proud of you," Jim added, voice cracking. "Said his little sister was the smartest person he ever met. He wanted you to live a loud life. He called it that." Tears streamed freely down Martha's cheeks now. "He said that?" "He did." The room around them didn't matter anymore. They were just two people in a sea of memories, connected by a fallen soldier and a shared wound. Martha reached into her blouse and pulled out a tiny golden chain, tucked beneath her neckline. A dog tag hung at the end. "I've worn this for years," she whispered. "Didn't even know if it was real. Found it in Dad's desk after he died." Jim leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That's real," he confirmed. "I remember it. Henry carved a little star into the corner with his pocket knife, said it was for luck." Martha turned the tag in her fingers. The faint, scratched-in star was still there. The moment settled between them like a prayer. "I think," Jim said softly, "you brought him back to life today." Martha smiled through her tears. "I think you never let him go." They sat quietly again, the sun now casting golden hues across the wooden floor. The restaurant around them was still, reverent, as if even the building itself recognized the weight of what had just been shared. Finally, Martha spoke, her voice barely audible. "After he died, I promised I'd build something that lasted, something that helped people connect. That's why I opened this place. It was never about money. It was about gathering people, creating space for stories." Jim nodded. He'd be proud of that. Then something in Martha's face shifted, a realization, or maybe a resolve. "I want to do something in his honor. In both your honors," she said. "From this day forward, every Wednesday will be Veterans Day here. Free meals, no questions asked, and we're renaming this table." She tapped the wood gently. Jim raised an eyebrow. "This is now the Callahan Ames table. There'll be a plaque, a story, and a seat always left open for anyone who's felt forgotten." Jim didn't speak. He couldn't. His heart was full, his silence loud. And for the first time in a very long while, the ache inside him loosened, just enough to let a little peace in. The restaurant had emptied out slowly, like a tide receding after a storm. Tables were cleared, chairs tucked back in place, but no one dared disturb the one at the center, the Callahan Ames table, where a single place setting remained untouched. A folded napkin, a glass of water, and an American flag pin resting on the edge of the plate. Jim was still seated, quietly watching the movement around him. His meal was long finished, but no one had rushed him. No one even thought to. Martha stood at the far end of the dining room, arms folded tightly against her chest, staring at the little plaque being installed by one of the staff. She had insisted it be made immediately, on polished wood with brass lettering, elegant but humble, just like Henry. As the last few staff members filtered out, Martha finally walked back over. Schwa. She looked different now. Lighter, maybe, but her eyes were still rimmed red. She took the seat across from Jim and placed her hand over the velvet box he still held. "I never cried at his funeral," she said softly. "I don't think I ever truly believed he was gone. Until now." Jim didn't reply. He didn't need to. The weight of that sentence said enough. Sometimes grief doesn't show up when expected. Sometimes it waits. For the right chair, the right silence, the right person, she continued, voice breaking gently. "I always thought the day I cried for him would feel like the worst day of my life, but it doesn't." Jim looked up. "What does it feel like?" Martha smiled weakly. "Like I've finally let him come home." She reached into her apron and pulled out a worn photograph. The corners curled with age. She slid it across the table. It was Henry, young, grinning in uniform, standing beside Jim and a third soldier whose name had long since slipped away. "He kept this in his helmet," Jim whispered, voice hollow with awe. "He showed it to everyone." Martha's eyes filled again, this time with a mix of pain and joy. "He told me once, if I don't make it back, make sure they remember I laughed." Jim smiled. He laughed until the end. And finally, Martha broke. The tears came silently at first, then harder. She covered her face, her shoulders trembling as decades of silence crumbled beneath her. Grief rushed in like floodwater, fast and overwhelming. Jim didn't speak. He didn't move. He just sat there, bearing witness. That was all she needed, all anyone ever needs when grief finally arrives, someone to stay. When the waves passed, she wiped her eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you for not letting me forget him," she whispered. Jim looked at her with quiet reverence. "Thank you for reminding me that stories live on when we speak them out loud." Outside the window, the sun was nearly gone now. Only amber streaks remained on the horizon, but inside the restaurant, it felt warm, safe, holy even. As Jim wheeled himself toward the door, Martha followed him. "I hope you'll come back," she said. Jim paused at the threshold. "I'll come back every year," he said, "on the day he saved my life." Martha stepped forward and hugged him gently. Careful, but full of gratitude. It wasn't a customer and owner kind of hug. It was a sister hugging her brother's last surviving memory. And then, just as Jim crossed the doorway, Martha turned and saw the Callahan Ames table once more. That empty seat didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt honored. It felt right. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe. More real, powerful moments like this await you every day.